Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Super Feeler podcast. My name is Lori, and I am super excited today to be joined by so many people. So we've got Heather, Dave, Shannon, and Diana. So you'll have heard Heather, Dave, and Shannon on a number of episodes with the DBT Skills series. And Diana is the person who wrote the book that we've been using to kind of help guide us through that series. And you've also heard Diana probably on, I think she was on episode 3 or 4 of the podcast. So you can always go back and listen to her full episode as well. So this is kind of us wrapping up the DBT Skills series, although there's skills that I think we haven't covered necessarily. So I don't know if it's the full wrap up or just the wrap up of Diana's book, but either way, we'll chat about that as well. So before we get started, I'm thinking it would just be helpful to do like a bit of an introduction of each person. So I'll just call on people, but to start, my name's Lori. I am calling from British Columbia, Canada, and I have had a borderline personality disorder diagnosis for 12 years-ish, and I have been doing dialectical behavior therapy and incorporating it into my life for about 10 of those 12 years, probably, maybe 11. And it has changed my life. It has saved my life. It has kept me out of jail. It has done all of the things that I really needed it to do. And I'm the host of this podcast. So I will pass maybe to Shannon.
My name is Shannon and I am calling from New South Wales, Australia. I was diagnosed with borderline about 5 years ago after a suicide attempt and was immediately put into a DBT group. I've done another 2 since then, and it has been a game changer and a lifesaver for me, and I'm just very grateful for these skills because I don't know what my life would look like right now if I didn't have access to this program.
Absolutely. And Shannon, can you remind me, did you do just skills groups or did you do like a full program DBT with like phone consultations, individual counseling, skills, all that stuff?
So I did 2 21-week programs and then a 12-week intensive that brought in like schema therapy as well. And so it was hospital based as an outpatient. So we would go in once a week and do a full day. We had access to be able to call the people that we were working with, so the facilitators and the psychologists. We still had standing appointments with the psychiatrist at the hospital while we were going through the program, but we were all outpatients and it was just a group setting, but we did have access to assistance if we needed it while we were attending the program.
So cool. I want to have my next mental breakdown in Australia, I think. I just did the skills groups and that was it. So very different than your experience for sure with like that intensive all day once a week. That's so cool. I love it.
Amazing, but it is very hard to get into. I was very lucky because the hospital that I was admitted to, well, I went into a public hospital, but I'm privileged enough to be able to afford private health insurance. So I was able to move to a private hospital that had amazing facilities and they ran this group. I know other people who have really struggled to find access to it here in Australia, and there is not a lot of free access for people. There are quite a few groups if you are able to afford to pay or have private health insurance, but just through Medicare, it is quite hard to get access to this therapy.
Yeah, same in Canada. I mean, like, if I had like $40,000 or whatever, I could have probably gone to a more intensive program, but that just wasn't an option. So yeah, makes sense. Okay, Dave, how about you?
I'm Dave. I'm in Miami in the United States. I was diagnosed with borderline about 3.5 years ago, and then with OCD about 2 years ago. But largely due to DBT, it's been almost 12 months since I met criteria on a daily basis. So, I've been in what I would consider full remission for about a year now. I did 2 9-month rounds of DBT. I continue to see my DBT therapist. And then I also spent time in a couple treatment facilities that were steeped in DBT. So, I really believe in it. And for whatever reason, I realize this is not a lot of people's experience, but my experience has been really complete separation from the symptoms of borderline on a daily basis.
Amazing. So cool to hear, and I'm so happy for you. Heather.
I'm Heather, and I am in the United States in Georgia, and I was diagnosed with borderline about a year ago, and I'm fairly new to DBT Skills. I've kind of been teaching them to myself and learning them through podcasts and books for about a year, and I've been working with my individual therapist, who is a specialist, for about 6 months now. So still new to DBT, but it's already life-changing. And I attend Super Feelers support group.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather. The fact that I kind of forgot that you were like self-teaching DBT to yourself, that's incredible. Like, you have such a good understanding of the skills for somebody who has been really like doing this on their own. It's such a good example of the fact that like with accessible resources, it's doable to help yourself. That's awesome. And then Diana, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Diana Partington, and I'm a licensed professional counselor that specializes in dialectical behavioral therapy. And it's been such a treat to listen to your book club, because it's a really weird experience to listen to a book club talking about your book. But it's incredibly moving, especially because you guys are all so like vulnerable and open and thoughtful in your perspectives and your experience. I also went through DBT as a client. I went through DBT as a client when I was about 39. I had dealt with suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, pretty much from the time I was 5 until I was 39. And then DBT was such a life changer for me that I went and became a therapist. Looking at you, Dave. And Lori. Lori is like practically a therapist. You're such an incredible advocate. And so, yeah, so it's just been an extraordinary privilege. My favorite thing is teaching DBT skills. I wrote my master's thesis about effective teaching because I can tell you, I had to sit through a ton of different groups, and some of them were really boring, and some of them were really dynamic and interesting. And I felt like my whole gig now is trying to figure out ways to make sure that it's really engaging and really, I feel like we all learn better if we go on an emotional journey. That's why I use stories in the book. So anyway, I'm really honored to be here. I'm actually like super tickled. I'm a little bit fangirling you guys because I've been listening to you talk. So it's really cool to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Diana. Yeah, it's been so much fun having the opportunity to go through this book together. So a couple questions for you, Diana, just kind of off the bat that I think will be maybe interesting. We've been really honest when we've been recording this series, and none of it, obviously we really love the book. There are some things that we've said in the series where we're like, I don't know if I love that. Like, there's one of the stories where we're like, I don't know, that didn't really sit with us. And so I'm curious, like, between that and the fact that we've really enjoyed your book, how that's felt for you to kind of listen to us honestly talk about your own writing and your own experience.
It's been really awesome. Like, it's so funny. I'm like, sometimes you've said things where I'm like, wait, but wait, but wait. Sorry, I guess I should mention I lost my voice a little bit yesterday. My like advanced DBT group, we did a rage retreat. And we did a lot of screaming, which was super fun. It was it was actually like a little bit of an exploration of like, once you've got your skills down, like, anger is not bad, but we just want to be mindful about when we're screaming. Because sometimes screaming or, really big expression of anger is actually appropriate to the situation. So we talked a lot about that because that's a dicey thing to navigate for people who've struggled with managing anger. But I did lose my voice a little bit, so that's what you're hearing. Like I was thinking when we, in the deer chapter, I was like, okay, I get it. I get what you're saying about why is it not deer man? And that's a very deliberate choice because to me, the deer is like the thing, right? The deer is like the protein. Like if you were going to cook tofu, I'm a vegetarian. So if you're going to cook tofu, tofu itself is like the protein. But if you want to prepare the tofu in a Thai dish, you're going to use different flavors, right? If you're going to cook a Japanese dish, you're going to season it with different flavors. And if you're going to do like some, American vegetarian restaurant, you're going to season it with another set of flavors. And to me, the deer is that protein, and the man, the give, and the fast are all different seasonings that you can add to that. And you're absolutely right. And I was like, dang, I really should have included the man, the deer, and the fast very specifically. I thought I was addressing it enough in the clarifying priorities chapter, because the priority of like relationship, self-respect, or objective is the man acronym, and self-respect is the FAST acronym, and relationship is the GIVE acronym. But I didn't spell those out, and I probably should have spelled them out in that clarifying priorities chapter. So second edition, we'll see.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like, to be honest, I think of the deer as the main bit too, to the point where I've kind of ignored the man, the man, the give, and the fast for my entire DBT life to this point. The only time that I really started thinking about those was because of the Super Feelers Club, where somebody reminded me of those additional components. And so, as like maybe, second edition, to even just say like, there are other components of this skill. I, for one, I don't know how other people felt, but the clarifying priorities chapter has been incredibly valuable to me personally. That kind of trio of the like, I think it's the clarifying priorities. Yeah, the self respect, the like maintaining relationship, and the third one is what?
Objective.
I don't know, like, is there a skill, like an actual DBT skill? Is it called clarifying priorities?
Okay, so here's the thing about the DBT skills, right? There's skills that like have a name, like opposite action, check the facts. But then there's like in Marsha Linehan's second edition book, there's skills that don't really have a name. Well, it actually is called clarifying priorities, but it's not a catchy name.
Yeah.
It's not even acronym catchy. And so there is a page in the early part of the interpersonal effectiveness unit that does lay that out. But one of the reasons that I gave a chapter of the book to it is because I think it's undertaught and underutilized. And it is addressed with the Dear Men Give Fast, but I think that sort of to me, this is like the really powerful thing about mindfulness and DBT, is being mindful when you go into an interaction. What's the most important thing here, right? Is it how you all are going to, like literally like here, right now, what's the most important thing? How you all are going to feel about me when this interaction is over? How I'm going to feel about myself when this interaction is over? Or my objective, what's my objective? An objective doesn't have to be like a material thing. Objective could be like to just have a great conversation, right? And so I think for the podcast, probably a great conversation is the objective, but I also care deeply about how you guys feel about the interaction.
Yeah, and you had a triangle image that I'll try and put in the video episode. That literally is like burned into my brain. And I'm so thankful for that, because I really don't think that I had the visual or the like words for that clarifying priorities thing. And I've been trying to teach it to everybody in my life, because it's one of those things where like, even, in a work circumstance, you're like, well, I think this is really wrong, but I don't want to offend somebody.
Right.
And it's like, well, you have to weigh those out, right? Like, is it wrong enough that you're willing to offend someone? And if that's the case, you need to have thought that through. And that in particular was incredibly helpful for me. I don't know if anybody else had like specific components that they really appreciated or like kind of had a new framing for.
I do. I can say one other thing because I just listened to the values episode. That is a DBT skill.
Is it? Okay.
It's a DBT skill. So again, like in the second edition of the book, it doesn't have like a catchy name, but there's like a values assessment survey. And then there's also like this, like, you sort of assess your value. This is in the emotion regulation unit. It's the sort of like, there's a sort of the check the facts and opposite action. And then there's a reducing vulnerability to negative emotions. And it's part of that part of the section. So when we are super feelers, we have a lot of vulnerability to negative emotions, right? And so that, the whole package of skills is about, like, okay, there's the physical part of taking care of like sleep and medication and exercise and, eating and all that stuff to make sure that you're, taking care of this instrument. Because, we all know when you're hungry, you get angry or testy or whatever. And I always say with the police skill, you kind of have to do both, like try to manage those, but also recognize if they're out of whack because, you didn't sleep last night or whatever, that you're more vulnerable to negative emotions. And so, part of that sort of kaleidoscope of things that make you more vulnerable is if you're not acting in line with your values.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's got a values assessment survey, and I changed it a lot, and I added what I've always done with my clients is, sort of, okay, but what does it mean? Like, is it your parents' value? Is it, and that distinction of whether you're acting on the value or you're not, and recognizing that sometimes you're in a season where you're not going to act on that value. I do know people who've done this, like my parents, but most people, when they have a newborn, adventure is not going to be a priority.
Right.
Some people, they're like, yeah, we're going trekking in the Himalayas with our baby. I don't know. But for most people, like sort of, raising a family becomes a top priority during that period of time. But there can be a season later where you prioritize adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. We really appreciated the categories, I suppose, of like important to me. It should be important.
So moving to hear that. It was so moving because like I've felt like that's such an important element that I don't see in other values assessments. And I feel like if you're really like, because what's the point of all of this? Like, what's the point of mindfulness? It's that awareness. Okay, what's going on with me? But it's very sophisticated to be able to recognize, oh yeah, that's my parents' value. Like my parents like don't watch TV. They just work like all the time. And I always felt like, oh, I'm a bad person because I love movies. I like escapism. And then I learned that actually it's okay to be like some escapism is okay, right? You don't have to be productive all the time. And I was like, oh, that's my parents' value. That's not my value. Although I do love productivity, but still.
There's a happy balance. I think that's the thing with all of it is it's not a dichotomous, this is my value, this isn't my value. It can change and it can be in the gray, even if you're doing a checklist, which is really helpful.
Absolutely.
I was going to say to Diana that I love the way that she framed that values thing. I had done a values exercise in my original DBT group, and it was exceptionally helpful for me because it helped me to understand my triggers better, I think. There's obviously normal emotional triggers, but when I had a deeper understanding. And I don't think that I'd ever really looked at that myself outside of DBT. I can really relate to the borderline of not really understanding who I was. And so to do that assessment and really dive deep into my values, and the highest one I realized was injustice. And it was my biggest trigger. And then I could start to understand where my anger and rage and those types of things were coming from. And when I understood the actual guts of that core value, it really helped me to be able to make sense of what I was feeling in my body. And I think that was such a big thing with DBT, to start to understand where these emotions come from. Not just that I was having them, but to have the skills to be able to look deeper and trace it back. And what is the thing? Where is this coming from? Why is this such a big deal for me? And it really come back to this values thing. But in your book, it was so different because it gave me that scope to be able to have a look at, why is this a thing for me? Is it something that's come from my parents? And you were just talking about productivity. When I had my youngest child, I really struggled with sleeping when the baby slept. And I would feel guilty if someone come over and knocked on the door and I was resting when I should be doing my dishes or doing my washing or vacuuming the floor or all of the things. And it compounded this thing of, I'm a bad person, I'm a bad mum, I don't know how to do this, when actually I was doing a really good job. And I don't think I realized until I did this, and I've done it a couple of times, but until I did it in your book and I was able to look at that and go, that productivity actually came from my parents, that they were busy, active people who they weren't just day resters. They are now. They're retired. They've got the space to do it, but they weren't when we were young. And so moving past that and understanding that, hey, I am a little bit different and I need to rest. And even now, when I haven't got young children, being a introverted extrovert, I need that rest to be able to rebuild myself and shut all the tabs down before I go back out in the world and have effective relationships and interactions with people. So I just wanted to say, Diana, thank you for this this extended way to be able to look into that, because even though I had done it before, I got so much more out of it this time.
Oh my gosh, girl, I so relate to that. I did not sleep. I could not sleep I couldn't sleep when my kids were little. It was terrible. And yeah, there's so much guilt that comes with being a mom. It just like kind of comes, I don't know, like the minute you're pregnant, you're like, oh, but I had that cup of coffee, whatever. So I love that you were able to kind of recognize, oh yeah, that's that. I mean, rest is a great thing to value, isn't it? It really is. I think when you shift into that, like, no, this is actually, it's part of my therapy. I have to reduce my emotional sensitivity or my vulnerability to negative emotions because I need to be well rested. I think when you can own that and enjoy that, I also think when you were talking about that on the podcast and when you're talking about it just now, I was thinking that the center can hold when you know what your values are, and that symptom of BPD, of like instability of identity. Maybe that's part of why Marsha includes that whole values assessment. I think there's two reasons. One is shame comes from not acting in line with your values, and shame kills people, right? So if we can be kind of getting you in line with your values, then you reduce shame, which makes life more survivable. But I'd never thought about this until you said that, because I was like, oh yeah, when you know what your values are, your identity starts to settle, right? That you're like, oh, I do know who I am. And it just makes me kind of wonder, like big picture, if a lot of instability of identity and BPD is sort of being buffeted by other people's values and not having clarity about your own. Because then if you're building a life from your values, you are going to have stability of identity. And I don't care if you're changing jobs, you know what I mean? Or you're reinventing yourself like Madonna. Because I guess that's maybe Lady Gaga, reinventing yourself like Lady Gaga. So I don't know. That was sort of interesting because Dave's experience, I've seen that over and over and over again. When people go through DBT, they just don't meet criteria for BPD anymore. Or, like I've had clients who are like, okay, I just had like a BPD moment, right? But I'm like, everybody has BPD moments. Like
100%.
that's just like, I mean, sort of whatever prejudice comes about that, like everybody does that sometimes. Okay, maybe not everyone, that's very not dialectical, but most people, most of the time, have at some point had a moment where their emotions overwhelm them, right?
If they don't, they're not human, right? I think like, yeah, that's such a good point. And that's interesting because Shannon, you actually had a question that you sent me in advance, which I think kind of goes along this line. Do you want to ask your question for Diana?
Okay, so my question was, have you worked with anyone that has not done any DBT work that has actually moved towards recovery that you would say is now not meeting criteria? Because this has been so life-changing for me, and obviously when I received my diagnosis, there was that, oh, this isn't curable. You're just going to have this, and this is what you deal with for the rest of your life. And DBT was such a huge game changer for me in understanding myself and learning how to cope and building healthy relationships. But I just wonder, is there another way? Have you seen people be successful and move towards recovery without these skills in their life?
So I just want to preface that, like, I mean, I went through DBT as a client before I became a therapist. And then in grad school, I specialized in DBT, right? So I'm like, that's all I do. That's not true. I know how to do EMDR and some other things like that, but like my specialty is DBT. So first of all, I'm going to have quite the bias. Oh, I don't know if you've seen, but our new administration, one of the forbidden words is confirmation bias. Did you see that? Not only are they not allowed to talk about women or females in scientific research, but they're not allowed to use the word confirmation bias, which is so interesting. But so
Weird.
confirmation bias is our tendency to look for information that validates what we already believe, right? And so I'm just owning that I have confirmation bias about DBT, even though I guess it's illegal to say that if I was applying for federal funding. But sorry, I don't mean to be so sassy. I try not to be super political.
No, it's
Really
you
hard
know what?
right now.
It's hard not to. That is, I hadn't heard that one, but it's okay. This is Canadian podcast. Let's call it that. You can do whatever you want.
New York Times
God.
this morning, they have the full list of things that are.
Please send me that link. I'm very curious.
Absolutely. It's pretty horrifying, actually. Especially not being able to mention women or females. Which is so weird in an anti-trans propaganda. So are men the only thing that exists?
Really, none of it makes any sense, does it? But anyways.
Anyway, moving on. We're all needing skills for the current confusion. There's instability of identity happening in the world.
There sure is.
So, confirmation bias. Your question. So, literally, I didn't know of anything until I listened to Lori's previous podcast, where you interviewed someone who wasn't that you, Lori? I think it was you.
Probably. I just have a lot of, I don't remember. Someone who had not gone through DBT.
That was doing some other modality.
Oh, yeah.
Developing for BPD. It has an equally complicated name. And I only have room in my brain for one complicated BPD treatment name.
Yeah, I think it might have been DDP. There's a bunch. And then there's like general psychiatric management or something. There's a few random acronyms. Yeah.
I gotta say, like, to me, like, those skills, I mean, I think I mentioned this when Lori interviewed me before. I felt like for me, I had gone through so much therapy. And I was like, I had a lot of insight. I know why I'm like this. Is that all that trauma? But I didn't know how to do things differently. And I remember so clearly in my 20s being in therapy, and I remember saying to my therapist, I just want a toolbox. I want someone to hand me a toolbox and be like, here's the wrench for this. And, anyone who's like been tool illiterate in terms of actually building a house or something, and then you start learning tools, you're like, oh my gosh, this is like when you have the right tool for the right job, it really makes the job so much easier. And so was like, I felt like my whole like mental illness journey was like a big like cry for a toolbox. And then the toolbox showed up and I was like, this is literally what I've always wanted. Not that I use skills perfectly every time, all the time, but like having the access to like just that, like being able to think through, like, okay, what's a fact and what's a opinion, right? And kind of break that out. That's so funny to me that that's become so controversial. Anyway, because it's really helpful for managing behavior, right? And not just getting lost in interpretations, observable facts.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, like, I have a huge bias towards DBT as well. And it has changed. I think we all do, right? Like all of us are here because DBT is important to us and has changed our lives. I do know some people that are like, didn't work, hate it. I found something different that worked better. And I think it is important to acknowledge that, like, hey man, if it doesn't work for you and you found something that works better, amazing. I'm so happy for you. Like, could not be happier for you. I have recently been taking a DBT, like advanced DBT, like course kind of thing, which is funny as a non-clinician. I was the only non-clinician. But one thing that they mentioned all the time is like there is a important like distinction between DBT based therapy and DBT, like compliant DBT. And I have, yeah, and I understand that. I also, and basically their point is like, if you're not doing DBT to the textbook that Marcia developed in 93 and you're licensed to do DBT, you're not doing DBT. And therefore people can't say it doesn't work because you weren't doing it exactly how it's prescribed, which like, I totally understand. The issue is access. Like I would argue like maybe Shannon and Dave have done, not even, I don't even think Dave has done like, Shannon's probably the closest to having done like compliant, like DBT that is actually the full program. That's like so well and good to say, but like public health systems can't afford to do full program DBT where you have a weekly individual counseling, you have your group skills training, you have individual phone consultations with your therapist. Like there's just so much cost, time, provider need and skill that like it's just not feasible. And so yes, I think that there's people who have gone through like DBT programs that are maybe not the full program and have said it doesn't work for me. But I literally just did skills groups and it changed my life and it continues to change my life. I have no problem with that.
There is research that supports that group skills training alone can be effective. I think, and the research is mostly about depression and not necessarily suicidality, but that's been my experience. Like in my groups, I have lots of people who they can't afford the full program. And I think the thing to remember about like from a clinician perspective, being a DBT therapist is very demanding. Like you have to be willing to work with very high risk clients. And, we like as therapists, you love your clients and, taking the chance of loving someone who wants to die is a very intense commitment. And phone coaching is a very intense commitment. I know when I was first a therapist, I was kind of a cowboy. I was like, bring it. come out of the hospital. I got you. And, 10 years of that, I'm like, yeah, I can't handle doing phone coaching anymore like I used to.
Mhm.
It's very taxing. But I feel like that's part of I was just at this big therapist conference last year, and a very famous DBT person who I have a lot of respect for did a presentation, and I was exhibiting about my book, and all these people were coming out going, I can't do DBT. It's too much. It's too intense. It's too difficult. And I was like, if you're trying to do fully adherent DBT, that is true. It is very demanding and it takes a lot of training. But I think that the DBT skills are skills that every clinician should be able to teach. Like, because they're so helpful. Like one of my dreams is for this book to be used in graduate counseling programs for theories of counseling, because if you have those skills and you're a clinician walking into like your first session with clients, you'll have something that you can offer that's real, you know? And so like I'm actually developing a whole like in May we're launching this whole program. It's specifically I'm trying to address accessibility issues. And so there's like the expensive member level is where they get to come to like group skills training with me. It's live, 12 people. But we have another level that's $50 a month where they get the workshops and they get daily skills reminders and little video lessons and access to chats. And I'm actually developing like a self-guided book study through the book and just like lots of resources that, yes, rely more on you being motivated, like Heather, to do some self-teaching, but community. And because I just think like these skills are so powerful and it is very difficult to access them. And so I don't know, that's my big thing. That's my mission, is to just be constantly looking for ways to make them more accessible.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the mission of this podcast series too, right?
Good. Yeah. Oh, actually, what I want to do, I hadn't even talked to you about this, Laura. I want to, in the self-guided book study, I want to have a link to your podcast for each episode that you did.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Like a way that if someone is just trying to work through the book alone, they'll feel like they're part of your community. Well, and then they actually can access your community.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, no, that'd be amazing. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, getting back to one thing, you're talking about people who have had a different experience with DBT. It occurs to me also that not all DBT practitioners are the same, and it doesn't even have to do with if they're, if they're competent or if they're checked out. It's just some people you click with, and some people you really don't click with, and so given the sort of broad scope of these skills and all the different things they cover, I wonder whether if people say DBT didn't work for them, it's that maybe they need to try a different practitioner or a different setting. Because that was my experience for the first full DBT round that I did. It helped, but it was with a woman who her style just didn't mesh with mine. She was very she would have like a for the first 15 minutes of each 2 hours, she would let people check in about their week. And there was a lot of just rambling, and, it would wind up taking up a half an hour. And then when I did it, I would just check out. And then the second time I did it, it was with someone who was much more my speed, where there was no check-in. We just jumped right into the skills. We were much more focused, and that worked for me. But, for other people, maybe it didn't. So I would just encourage people to give it another try.
Dave, you're literally saying what Marsha Linehan says. So, because this is one of the things I love about Marsha Linehan is I've met people who created other very popular modalities, and they're like, my way is the only way. And Marsha has never said that. Marsha says, if DBT isn't working for you, it's either because you didn't find the right practitioner, that's a good fit for you, or they're not implementing it in a way that's effective, or it's not the right treatment. And I love that she has that openness to the possibility that it might not be the right treatment. And the thing that she says that's the most heartbreaking is, and sometimes the right treatment hasn't been invented yet. And that always takes me back to high school, because when I was in high school in the 80s, because I'm old, and DBT hadn't been invented. You know how life-changing it would have been if I could have gone through DBT as a teenager? But it didn't exist, right? Shannon's like, yes, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And that's why Marsha created it, is because she didn't have the access to it. And she was like, wait, something has to work. And she was able to create it. And I think the other part that I want to add is that it's not necessarily the wrong provider, the wrong therapy, but also it could be just the wrong time. Like, I am 10 years into DBT, and I am still building new connections in my brain about specific skills that at the time that I first learned DBT, I was trying to survive, make sure I had a roof over my head, and stay out of jail. Like, I needed the skills that were like, this exact moment, I'm going to be able to do this. I was not able to think about what are my values and how did they connect with each other, and like, how does mindfulness interact with distress tolerance, and how do I stay mindful but also not judge myself. And I remember just thinking, like, some of these skills are absolute bullshit. And now some of those skills are my favorite skills because I'm in a place where I can make those connections between all of the different things. And I think that I will be on that journey for the rest of my life. And I will still be finding my new favorite skill of the year because it happens to be relevant to the thing that I'm going through, or I have the rest of them figured out enough that I can now focus on something different. And so I think there's so many factors, and I'm never going to force, like, when people tell me DBT doesn't work for me, I'm like, I'm really sorry to hear that. If something else works, great. And if not, like, let's talk more about DBT, because I think that there's ways like your book where it can be a lot more accessible than love Marsha, hero of mine. Her handouts, her way of writing are not great. Right? Like, they are very old, first of all, and dry and not colorful and word heavy. And I can't even imagine not having, graduated high school, for example, and trying to read through those things and comprehend them. Whereas yours are a lot more just accessible, which I really appreciate. Dave, go ahead.
I think there's just, I really like the different spots where you talked about seasons and, things changing in terms of needs at different points of life. It's occurred to me that, if I had gotten my diagnosis when I was 20 or 25, those are times in my life that, and I suspect for a lot of other people, that radical acceptance of having a serious mental health issue is almost impossible, because you see everybody around you, they're young, they're invincible, everybody's got their whole life to live, and accepting, like, I have something that's going to make it hard for me to live a life worth living if I don't put serious work in, is really difficult. And it does occur to me that to really engage with these skills, like for me as a 46-year-old or a 44-year-old, it was relatively easy, because I was just like, I'm miserable. Like, I'm over blaming my parents and other people, like, regardless of whether, these people deserve some blame. It was like, I am just, something inside me is broken, and I am ready to fix it regardless of the cause. And I think that's a lot to expect of someone who's in their late teens or early 20s.
Totally.
I want to address that because my specialty for a decade was suicidal teens. And it's like sort of complicated, because I think the reality is, to me, of whenever you get people who are suicidal, they are in such extraordinary pain that they are extremely motivated clients. And that's why, like, I love working with people who have BPD, because they're so motivated, right? Because it's like, they're like, listen, I'm trying to pull the escape hatch here because I can't tolerate the pain. But if I give you something else that starts to work, I mean, we get addicted to even suicidal ideation because there's an escape hatch that happens with just thinking about it. But giving you something else to use, and then it starts working. That is so amazing. And it is actually very effective with teens as well. And dialectically, Dave, I get it, because like I was 39, 40 when I went through DBT. And who knows if I would have been ready, but it is actually, teenagers become such DBT evangelists. It's so cute, because then they're just like out there like, oh yeah, teaching skills to their friends. And it's pretty awesome, actually. It's really awesome. But there is nothing more motivating than unbearable pain.
Yep. If you can motivate as opposed to stay, like, it's like the rats, oh my God, what's it called? Learned helplessness, right? You can be a rat that's been shocked so many times that you just give up trying to escape, or you can use that as motivation to continue. And I think that sometimes it needs, there's certain types of people that are better at just keeping going in that sense. But again, time is everything.
I guess backtracking on a couple of things. First of all, this book is for everyone, I think, obviously, that has emotions, which is most of people. But I have totally been like, let's get this to the young community. Like, I would have received this so well, and I even still do. But it is written in such a beautiful, modern, understanding, accepting way. This book is like, I've already made my little sister get it. Like, I want to give it to everyone. I've made my therapist get this book already. I don't know that he has, but I made him write it down, and I talk to him about it like every session. And I just think that you did an awesome job of teaching. The lived experience was so important. I actually learned a few skills that I didn't really understand, and I thought I was using, like radical acceptance used to be my enemy. And I'm gonna cry because it's so like, I have shifted the course of my life because of joining this group, reading this book because of DBT. And like, I want everyone to, I'm happy crying. So like, it's not even trying to stop crying, but it's like, I want everyone to feel this relief of like hope. Like you are okay. You're accepted. And this book made me feel like that. And I love what you said about how you're trying to get things going and get this out to everyone, because since reading this book, I've been trying to figure out how to create a local support group and basically, not professionally, but essentially teach these skills myself to people who can't access that, because I don't know, it just feels so important. And you're awesome, and Lori, you're awesome, and all of you guys are awesome.
Okay, now I'm crying. There's a problem with being a super feeler, is when someone's saying nice things. I'm like, oh my God. It means so much to hear that, Heather.
It even has shifted the course of my relationship. I've never done a values assessment, which is something we were talking about in the beginning here. And there are holdups where just understanding what your values are really can shift everything, because my husband and I had a lot of things that I think we felt that each other just didn't care enough or wasn't hearing the other one. But it's really that we just have these different values, and being able to grasp that has gave us a different understanding of each other. So, and I've had, my friends have all been listening to the podcast in support, and they're starting to be like, where do I get this book? I want to learn these skills. And I had a friend reach out to me and say that she realized that her values weren't her own. They were her parents' values because of this book, because of this podcast. So you guys are really out here changing lives in a very positive way.
Thank you, Heather. Like writing this book, it took me 9 years to write this book. And there's a lot of me in the book, and it like, sometimes it felt like it was never going to happen, was never going to be finished. And, I don't know, but I just wanted it to be like, I wanted it to be really validating. Do you know what I mean? Like, just to read the stories. So it always just means a lot to hear that. I really appreciate it.
You've done such a good job of it. I don't know if I told you this, Diana, but so we started this series, Dave, Megan, Shanti, and I started the series in July-ish. Started recording. End of August, I ended up in my first inpatient treatment because I had a major suicide crisis. And I brought my book because I was halfway through. I was preparing for the podcast launch. It was the weirdest timing of my life. And so I hadn't finished the book yet. And I figured, like, you know what? There's no better time for me to just take this time to like focus on these skills. And the treatment, quote unquote, didn't actually have treatment. It was more like med management, but like inpatient. So I was like, I'm going to treat myself through going through the skills and just using this as an opportunity to like fully self-care and focus. And I would be reading the book every day. And I had my highlighters and my sticky notes and my pens and my everything. And people started coming up to me and being like, hey, what are you reading? What are you doing? And so when I was taking a break from reading the book, I would kind of let other people read it, and they would just read through the stories. And I think there was 10 beds at this treatment facility. And I think at least 7 of them had BPD, if not more. Like 7 people that told me that they had BPD. So probably more. And people were like blown away at how much they resonated with the book. And there were a lot of people, you know, I have a master's degree. I don't like reading, to be honest, but I, you know, have like, you know, a high literacy level, whatever. There were a lot of people who didn't have that. And so reading your book compared to getting handouts from the psychiatrist was a completely different experience. And the visuals, the color, like truly the visual way that you've presented things is unheard of in DBT. And I really appreciated it. I think I accidentally sold like 10 copies of your book while I was in treatment. And people were literally like, how do I buy this book? Where do I buy it? The social worker that worked at the center bought the book in front of me during a session because she was so excited about the fact that this book existed, and she was reading through it just like in our social work session. And I think that like every single person that I've like physically had the opportunity to show the book, like hand it to them for 5 seconds, have been like, oh my God, I need this. And I mean, I could give it to 100 people in my life as Christmas presents, as like self-help kits. Like and I'm not just saying this, Diana, because you're here. Like truly, I'm a pretty honest person. If I hated your book, I would say I really fucking hated your book. And I am not a reader. Like you're probably like, that's probably one of the first books I've like finished in a long time, because it has the opportunity to be interactive, but also has the stories and the visuals. And it's just amazing how much people are interested in it when they physically see it, as opposed to if you were to say like, oh, I'm doing a dialectical behavior therapy skills workbook. They'd be like, okay, I have no interest. So yeah, I just really appreciate that everybody that I've shown it to has gone out and bought it. And I'm not making any money off that. Like, it's so funny. I'm always like, I don't have any vested interest in this at all, other than the fact that like, I think this is a great book and you should all buy it. Like, it's awesome. I have a couple of other questions, and I should have done my homework on this question, but I didn't. So there were some skills, like we talked about, Dear Man, Give Fast, whatever, but there's also others, and I can't think of them off the top of my head right now, which is the part I should have done my homework on, but that you didn't include. Did you have reasons for that? Was it because you didn't want the book to be 500 pages? Is there a second edition that's going to have additional skills? Like, what was the thought process on what to include and what not to include?
Partially it was length. I mean, it's already 340 pages long. And so I did cut about 4 chapters. I cut part of it had to do with the short stories, honestly, because I was using the genesis of the book is I was teaching using short stories, like using stories, and my clinical supervisor was like, "You need to write those down," and I was like,
"Oh." And they were based off of generalized experiences of your clients, right?
Yeah. So I mean, some of those experiences are actually my experience. I mean, I'll just be honest, the chapter on self-soothing with the five senses. I mean, obviously I am not Korean. That character was is a fictional character, but that was my suicide attempt experience when I was in 10th grade. It was very close to, so you see there's like stories in there that are like actually based on me. But yeah, I tried to do like composite characters, things like that. So funny, the last chapter, the alternate rebellion chapter, people have said, well, that would be nice if that happened in real life. And I was like, it did. So yeah, so partially it was a length thing, partially it was like the skills that I had stories for. But like one of the things that ended up on the cutting room floor was I had a chapter on from the improve the moment skill, improve the moment with positive imagery. And I like to tell a story about the trip my family took to Komodo Island when it was like in the 80s it was very, very rugged trip. And like, I won't get into it now, but what I realized with my editor is that the story was too much about me. Do you know what I mean? It was too much just about me and my experience, and not in a way that's sort of universal. Do you know what I mean? And I was too attached to the details of the story. And so we were like, yeah, this one, it's too long, it's too unwieldy. And it was literally like, look at this. It's one of the craziest stories of my life. So it's like, look at this crazy story of mine that has a little bit of skills at the end. Do you know what I mean? So we cut that. I had a whole short story about the distracting with thought, and I got rid of that one and combined the skill with the push away, the story that I used for the push away skill. So a lot of that was like kind of the guiding light is like, is this going to be universal? Do you know what I mean? Because I think that's one of the things that I love about DBT skills is they're so universal. Like that, one of my, so I used a lot of beta readers who would read things and then give me feedback in addition to professional editors. And one of my favorite things that happened was that the values chapter where, the main character is a trans kid who's into BDSM and like has this whole queer identity. And this woman, this very churchy, older Black woman, read that chapter, and she said when she started it, she read the book cover to cover. And she said when she started that chapter, she was like, this is going to be my least favorite chapter. And then she said that she was like, that was my story. She was like, not the extra parts, but the rest of it was my story. And she was like, that's my favorite story. And when she said that, I was like, oh yes, okay, this is working. Because, that whole diversity, equity, and inclusion thing, that's really important to me. And I think it shows in the book.
It definitely does.
Because I wanted everyone to pick up the book and see themselves from from the sort of more superficial things, or maybe it's not superficial, maybe that's not the right word, but from, sort of cultural, ethnic perspective, but the actual lived soul experience of being human and being emotionally sensitive. I wanted it to feel like everyone could see themselves, at least somewhere in the book, at least.
I certainly felt that way. There's a few stories. I can't remember what chapter it is, but there's a story where somebody's driving in the car with their parents on a road trip, and
me, yep.
And I just remember sitting there in like awe about like basically reading my life. And that wasn't the only one. There were many, but that one stood out. Do you remember what chapter that is?
It's chapter 5. It's the effectively skill.
Right. So I remember that, and I read it almost a year ago now, right? And that in itself is kind of impressive because I have a bad memory, but also impressive in the fact that the stories are standing out in such a like meaningful way. And I do think you did a really good job of including like a variety of cultures, people being able to see themselves in the imagery. That is so important. And it's so easy to accidentally just like have all skinny white people in illustrations. And that is not what you've done at all here. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I'm developing a deck of it's like just the distress tolerance toolkit. And it's all every card has an illustration. And again, it's like, I'm like, we gotta make sure that everyone's here. The other thing that's kind of fun is the book is there's a Polish publishing company that just bought the rights to the book. So it's going to come out in Polish. And I was like, see, another benefit of diversity, equity, and inclusion is that people in Poland feel that they can relate to this book that is really all about American characters. But there's, I was like, is it because of the Russian immigrant character?
Well, this series has people from this podcast series has people from 3 continents, 4 countries, and like in the States, a bunch of different states, a bunch of different provinces, right? Like clearly this story is resonating with a variety of people in various countries. And that's important. That's super important. And it goes to show that like our combined experiences are very similar.
Yeah.
Despite where we live. None of us have met. Oh no, I've met Dave. But Dave and I live on opposite sides of North America.
Yeah.
And your stories are still resonating with us.
Love that. Oh, one other thing I wanted to say is I'm dyslexic. And so bibliotherapy is torture. Anyone else feel that way? When my therapist is like, there's a great book you should read. I'm like, don't make me read that book. Too hard. And I always learn better when there's a story. And so that's part of it, is I was like, you know what? I'm not the only one that's true for. And so, so I really was like, I want this book to be something that even if someone is like going to open the book and they're going to be like, I don't care about that story, they can just read the didactic part or the charts or, like the graphics or whatever. Or even if they're just like, I don't really want to read, I just want to look at the pictures and the graphics, they still will learn something, right? Or some people are just going to be like, I just want to read the story. I don't want to read the whatever that stuff is. So
would you ever do an audiobook? Like there is so much visual to it that I don't know how that would resonate, but.
So 2 problems with the audiobook. The first problem is because there's so many embedded illustrations in the book, Amazon won't publish it as an ebook. Won't sell it as an ebook because they only do, it has to be presented as a fixed format. They can't do the flexible format. And so
that's too bad because an ebook would actually be super helpful because you could write.
It is an ebook.
Oh, okay.
But it's only on Apple Books and some other odd places that are very hard to find. But Apple Books has it and it's only $2.99. Like I tried to make it really affordable. The reason that the book is not, it's $34.99 US is I don't actually make any money on that book. It's because the printing cost is so expensive. That's okay. It's allowed me to meet people like you.
Yeah. I'm like, honestly, it's like this podcast. I lose money every month, but I know it helps people and I love it. So here we are.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yes. Oh, so the audiobook. So the first problem is if you don't have an ebook on Amazon, they won't publish the audiobook on Audible. Does that make
weird?
Sense?
Okay.
So there's like a whole thing. So if I went ahead and produced the audiobook, there would be limited ways for distribution. The other thing that is an issue to me is like the didactic parts of the book, I could just read those. I also I kind of like playing with accents, but I feel like you get into really icky territory with that. And so I would have to hire actors. Like I'd need an actor with a the Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands accent. I need an actor, like I need the Russian mother, someone who can speak Russian, someone who, because I just would never want to do anything that made any of the characters feel like a parody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would, so I'd have to actors read each of the stories.
And that's
so
expensive.
There's no production element. And right now I'm working on this membership and the app and all this things rolling out. So, but yes, I very much want to do an audiobook of it. So that's in the ether.
Yeah. No, that's interesting, especially about the Audible thing. I didn't know that. So, I mean, at that point, that's where most people are getting their audiobooks, I think. So, yeah, is it worth a huge investment? I had to hire voice actors once for a project I was doing at work. It is not cheap and it's not easy. And to have that many, I only had to hire 3, and even that was really challenging, let alone like the whatever 15, 20 you would have to hire for this. So,
exactly.
Interesting. Okay. Any other questions from the group for Diana before we kind of go into a final couple questions? Oh, Dave, you're muted.
Are there 1 or 2 skills that you find people seem to get those early on, and it makes a particularly big difference?
I was thinking about what Lori you were saying earlier about having a master's degree and all that, but even people who don't have that sort of high literacy benefiting from DBT. And I think I always think about the story about Wise Mind that was inspired by I had several clients that had developmental disabilities, and what I found is we did a whole DBT program, and it seemed like most of the skills were just very elusive for them. But that skill of noticing when you're in emotion mind, and so I feel like that's like the first skill is just noticing when you're in emotion mind. Right? So emotion mind, emotions are running the show. Reasonable mind, sort of hard logic, cold logic is running the show. Wise mind, you're honoring the emotions. That's so important. You're honoring your emotional experience. You're honoring, validating the emotions and thinking through the consequences, right? And so that first thing of just starting to, I'm in emotion mind. Even if you still act out of emotion mind, at least if you have the mindfulness of, this is emotion mind, right? And then that next little step to maybe this isn't a good time to act, right? Just like, okay, I'm in emotion mind. Okay, I'm still going to do the thing. Okay, next step, I'm in emotion mind. Okay, it's not a good time to act. So now I'm going to just take a step back, whatever the thing is, until I can get myself into my wise mind before I act. And then just like that understanding of what wise mind is. To me, every single skill in DBT is pointing you to your wise mind. Every skill is about helping you get into that wise mind space where you can truly honor your emotional experience and not dismiss it, and think about consequences, and think about your goals, what you want. So we're not blowing things up unless it's time to blow things up. I don't know.
I have 2 final questions that I'm curious about. So just kind of overall for everyone, including Diana, if you have any reflections from participating in this series that you wanted to share with the group or with the listeners, I suppose, not just the group.
I think one thing that was interesting to me is occasionally when you guys were talking, you'd be like, well, that doesn't seem realistic, or that doesn't seem real. And I was like, it's real. It's real.
Yeah, I think the stop skill was one where we talked about that a lot. Was it that one where it was like getting a reminder?
Oh, the stop skill, yeah, where you were like, that doesn't happen. I was like, no. These are stories that happened because I was sending out stop reminders, because I always do that around the holidays for my clients.
Genius.
I send out stop reminders. And with the membership thing, with the app, there's going to be push notifications so you can sign up to get stop reminders as push
that's great
notifications in the app. So just things like that,
yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I remember that. I totally remember that. I was like, no, Lori, damn, that was real.
That's so funny. Yeah, I mean, I wish that happened in my life. That's so cool.
Think about it. If you send a stop reminder text at 3:00 on Thanksgiving
on Christmas Day or whatever, yeah.
What are the odds that you're going to land right in the middle of some supercharged conflict with your family? Just
Truly.
saying, like if you run the numbers.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you could put money on that for sure.
When you guys were like, well, isn't that convenient that it just showed up in the middle of this conflict? And I was like, well, but
it did.
Timing is everything.
No, it's a great point. That's so funny. Shannon, how about yourself?
I just wanted to add, and it kind of goes into what you you guys mentioned before, but about the accessibility. I have actually taken some stuff out of this book and taken photos of it and sent it to friends. Like people who have reached out and said, "Oh, this thing's going on. I'm really overwhelmed at the moment." Just a couple of nights ago, I sent the Make a Worry appointment thing and just took photos of the chapter and sent it to my friend. They have no idea that this is DBT. They have no idea that it's coming from treating super feelers and a borderline perspective, and yet they're like, oh my God, this is revolutionary. How did I not know about this? And for me, someone who for years and years and years, I had done therapy for a very long time before I got my diagnosis. And Laurie and I have spoken before about feeling like you were a bit gaslit by CBT and other types of therapy, like when you're like, why is this not working for me? But to be able to just use these skills in the way that you have put them, I would have never taken a photo of my DBT handouts from Marsha and sent them to a friend, because not only do you need a degree to understand them if you're just reading them, like there's no way if somebody handed me those handouts and said, here, take this home and do it, that I would have been able to get my head around it without a facilitator. So to have this incredibly accessible tool now in my toolbox, and I love it, but I can take these little snippets in your words and pass them on to a friend, and they have no idea of how amazing this whole book is. But to give them tools that are so helpful for us and that should be helpful for everybody. Like, I just think everybody in high school should be given a copy of this book. This is shit we should be teaching kids in school. It would have made a huge difference to my teen years. Like Dave said before, had I been put into DBT in my late teens or 20s, I don't know if I would have accepted it as well as what I did in my 40s. But had I been given this book, it could have changed the course of my life. And I just want to say thank you, Diana, from me here and from me back there, who spent such a large portion of her life feeling like she didn't fit in or wondering what was wrong with me. If I had something like this, it would have changed my world. Thank you for making that for all the people that are coming after us.
Thank you, Shannon. I love that. So you're a DBT evangelist now. Like, one of the things with now you've made me cry again. You made me cry.
All emotions are valid. Crying is totally fine here.
I'm such a weepy. I cry at like the drop of a hat. Anyone else know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So, it's funny. There was a debate about what to name the book. Like, do we say DBT in the title, or do we just put it in the subtitle? Because, like, if we called it Suffering Optional, DBT Skills for whatever, which actually my next book is going to be titled Suffering Optional, it's like, is it limiting or is it helpful? Do you know what I mean? Because DBT is gives you like, you're like instantly oriented. Okay, this is an evidence-based thing. But also, I agree, these skills are good for everyone. Actually, I'm very, very privileged to be consulting on a research project on developing a curriculum for fourth, sixth, and seventh graders of DBT curriculum.
Yay!
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I know, it's really exciting. So, who knows? Who knows what the possibilities are? But I do love that. I love that you are snapping pictures and sending them. And like, just, it's that thing, when you really start to love skills, you really want to share them. And I'm just really glad that you're experiencing that accessibility. It really means a lot. Thank you.
Like, when was the last time any of us did long division? Versus when was the last time any of us needed to do a DBT skill? Like, truly, our priorities in school are not aligned with like what we actually need to know how to do. Dave or Heather, any thoughts like overall about participating in the series?
I was just gonna kind of what Shannon and I have already said, and Diana in the beginning. I relate. It's basically the same exact thing that I said to my husband, that this is the toolbox I've always been looking for, DBT itself, and then this book, the comprehension of it, the inclusiveness of it, the validation, made it so like that was access itself to the DBT in a way that I didn't have it. And before I found a DBT therapist, I was going to lots of therapy and being like, this isn't working. I need a specific toolbox that I can't find. And so, yeah, I just kind of wanted to bounce off that and say that's why also, like Shannon, I'm like, get this to the youth, because it would have been, it's everything that that's lacking previously to start these skills young. And so, yeah, you're awesome. And we're going to tell everyone.
It's true.
One thing that's funny with the book is because there's pictures, people always think it's a children's book or like it's for teenagers. And I like to tell people, I'm like, there's a lot of very mature themes in this book. So I think of it as like a 16 and up kind of book. Adults like pictures too. Right? So yeah, I just always like to add that caveat because there are a lot of very mature themes in the book.
There are, but there's also very mature themes in life. Like, I can assure you that people are seeing this stuff online in TV shows long before they're 16. And, you could always modify it to a younger crowd too, eventually. But either way, like, even if you skip some of the stories, you're still going to get something really valuable. Dave, any thoughts on your end?
I agree with everything that everyone has said. It's a terrific book. It's an amazing resource. I love that there's so much in there for people with so many different learning styles, to where, and also just I think that you really just beautifully walk the line of both offering a lot of information, but also with a real human warmth, woven into it, so that, it doesn't feel like you're getting lectured. It doesn't feel like, you're getting judged, or even sometimes it doesn't feel like you're like doing learning. It feels like you're, just reading about life, and I appreciate that. I think also, I just wanted to say, I think that the way that you've titled it, DBT for Life, it also walks a difficult line very, very beautifully, in the sense that, I think that DBT is important, and it's something that some number of people know about, and so it tips people off that that's what it's about. I think it was a plus choice to make it hard to find the word borderline in it, because I have noticed a lot of people out there. For a while I was listening to a lot of podcasts where it was like survivors of emotional abuse and narcissistic abuse and things like that, and there were so many people who I would listen to their stories, and I'd say, I'm not a clinician, but you are dead on in the bullseye center of like the criteria for borderline. And it makes me so sad to think that there's so many of those people out there that, because of the stigma around around the term BPD and on social media, that if you if someone had written this book, but they had put borderline even on the back of it in the description or in the introduction, there's people who would have just said, I can't be involved in anything. It's just too scary because of the stigma. So I just wanted to say thanks to, as someone who, for me, the label has been very important. And I think that was a really terrific choice as well. But great book. Fantastic.
Thank you, Dave. I think there's a dialectic about the diagnosis, right? I mean, Marsha Linehan wants to get rid of that diagnosis, partially because of the stigma and partially because there's so much misunderstanding inherent in it. And she wants to call it emotion dysregulation disorder. And I feel like the root of BPD is unbearable pain, right? The root of BPD is growing. I mean, this is what Marsha says. How do you get BPD? The biosocial model. You put an emotionally sensitive child in an invalidating environment. Now, sometimes the invalidating environment is as severe as sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is sort of a penultimate form of invalidation. But also sometimes very well-intentioned parents do not understand or even are really emotionally sensitive themselves, right? And have difficulty with emotion regulation. And the interaction of those two things creates an escalation of behavior. And so I like that model because it's such a no fault kind of model. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, this person did this, and then this person did this, and then this person responds, and then this person responds. And you end up with this very big behavior, that's centered around fear of abandonment. Trying to figure out who you are in a very, very invalidating world. So,
Shannon, I know you have to go, so I just want to ask you my final question. That it could be 2 words, but what would you want to tell your past self on your first day of DBT?
Okay, so I would want to say to myself, you are about to be given the gift that is going to change your life. And buckle up, bitch, because it's going to be one hell of a ride.
That is very fair.
Yeah. It is beautiful in all of its stress and trauma and digging. It is not easy. And I think we're here and we're talking about this book and what we have achieved with our super feeler status, and to be in a place where we can help other people by being a part of this podcast and sharing Diana's work and making it accessible to even someone. It costs nothing for somebody to jump on Laurie's podcast and listen to this. I feel incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be able to share that with people and be involved with you guys in doing that. But I also want to acknowledge all of us for getting here. We talked about alternate rebellion in our last episode, and this, for all of us, is the ultimate act of alternate rebellion. The fact that we are here doing this, that we are choosing to survive and live in a world that is not always an easy place for us. Despite all of the things, the stigma, everything that's attached to it. So, yeah, buckle up. That's what I would say to her. I had no idea where this would lead me, but my life is so much better for taking this journey in all of the rough bits and the beautiful parts.
Thanks so much, Shannon. Okay, go to work, drop your kid off at school.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye. I know we're out of time, but I'll just quickly answer that question as well and ask the rest of you. So I think, first of all, overall reflections is this has been such a beautiful experience to be not only Diana, your book, but also just having an opportunity to talk through these skills in a more conversational way, as opposed to a like, we're in therapy now way, and learn from others about how they use it. I've built so many connections in my head around how these skills interact with each other that is brand new for me. And I really, really appreciate it. What I would want to tell my past self on my first day of DBT would be, I love the buckle up, bitch. That's great. But go do it. It's going to be hard. Do your homework. Don't give up. And this is not going to be a one and done. You are going to continue to use these for the rest of your life, and it will make your life so much better. So don't give up, because we're just at the beginning. Heather, what would you tell yourself on your first day of DBT?
I'm all kinds of emotional right now. I don't know. I'm feeling a lot of stuff.
That's fair. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to.
What keeps coming up to me is just like the suffering is optional. Just learning that. I mean, that's everything. That is DBT, right? I mean, it just buckle up, bitch, is perfect. I mean, I loved that as well. But just knowing, here's your toolbox. Like, trust this. I'm sappy right now. I'm proud of you guys, and I'm proud of myself. And yeah, that's all I have right now.
Proud of you too. Awesome. Thanks, Heather. Dave, how about you?
I don't know if there's anything that I would say to myself. I was fortunate to come into it with a lot of enthusiasm, and also some pretty strong beliefs that it was what I'd been looking for a long time, and it turned out to be absolutely true. And yeah, so I'm not sure I have much that I would say to myself.
Not buckle up, bitch. That's devastating to me. No, that's super valid too. That's hilarious. Diana, last word to you.
I think I would say to my former self walking into that first therapy appointment with my DBT therapist, don't be such an asshole to your therapist.
Amazing.
I was so awful. She actually came to my book launch party, and I was so grateful. And we laughed about how awful I was in that first session. I was like, nothing is going to help me. And you, with your rates and your whatever the hell bullshit you're peddling, I don't think it's going to work.
And here we are.
Here we are.
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much. This has been honestly one of the best, most exciting things that I've done in such a long time. I've loved every minute of it. I'm not going to close the door on the fact that we might talk about other skills in the future, so stay tuned. And Diana, thank you for all of your work. Yeah, we obviously care so much about you. So buckle up, bitches. We're not done with this podcast yet. We'll keep going. Okay, have a great day, guys. Yeah. I love you all. You are the best, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for listening to the Superfeeler podcast. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded territory of the Matsqui and Sumas First Nations. If you'd like to learn more about the Superfeeler podcast, share your story, or participate in the Superfeelers Club, which is our peer support group, it's totally free, virtual, and open to anyone who experiences intense emotions or has borderline personality disorder, please check out the link in our show notes or go to laurieedmondson.com. If you would like to support the show, we would very much appreciate it. There's an option to do monthly small donations at whatever denomination you'd like, and you get bonus content, extra resources, and extra connection to me throughout. That can be found on patreon.com/superfeeler, or again in the notes below. Thanks again, and have a great day.